or if you didn't grab it. Now, you're stuck on these problems here. It says 24 equals negative 6/7 u. We talked about ones yesterday that look like this. 33 equaled 3u. What did we do to solve those?
The 33 divided by 3.
Exactly. We just divided by 3 and we got 11. But now we're working with fractions. It's the same thing. I have something right in front of my variable. This means negative 6/7 times u. To get rid of this, we're going to take 24 and we're going to divide it by that negative 6/7. So then this is what they did. When we divide with fractions, we end up inverting and multiplying. So we make it 24 over 1 times negative 7/6, right? And then we say, oh, 6 goes into here once and into here 4 times. 4 times negative 7 is negative 28. So here's what they did. When you looked at the Alex explanation, they said 24 is equal to negative 6/7 u, and right away they went times negative 7/6 times negative 7/6 so that they could cancel that out and cancel that out. Because they're dividing, they end up inverting and multiplying that fraction.
That's why it was so confusing, because yeah, that's probably exactly what it looked like. I was like, huh?
So I don't like it that they skipped this step, because you have to know, I'm really dividing by a fraction, and then I follow my rules. So I'm not going to skip that step.
Thank you.
I'm going to do it. Now this one looks a little bit different because they made it into one big fraction instead of a second fraction. But this really is the same thing as negative 7/5 v equals negative 14. Doesn't matter if that v's on top or v's behind it, it's still the same thing. So I want to get rid of the negative 7/5. I'm going to do that by dividing by negative 7/5, right? That is multiplying. When I move it over, I divide. And so when I divide, I'm going to take negative 14 times negative 5/7, because I've got to invert and multiply.
So I'm going to go 14 over 1 though.
Yep.
Times 5/7.
And then I can reduce, right?
1 and 2.
And then when I multiply, I get
Negative 10.
negative 10. No. I don't get negative 10.
2 times 5.
Negative
Oh,
2
there's
times
negative-
negative 5.
Negative 14. Yeah.
No,
Okay.
no, the 2 times 5 part is 10, but a
So
negative times a negative is a
Positive.
positive 10. Now, if I were checking that out, it would mean I'd have negative 7 times 10 over 5, right? Putting the 10 in for the v. 7 times 10 is 70. 70 divided by 5 gives me negative 14. That's how I would check that. I'd put that number in for the variable, and since 7v means 7 times v, that's how I check it. Now then they do this to you. Sometimes the fraction is not in front of the variable. Sometimes it's just a plain number in front of the variable. Everybody gets so used to, oh, I got to flip the fraction, got to flip the fraction, got to flip the fraction. But in this case, what am I doing? I'm moving the 5 to the other side, so I'm taking negative 15/7 divided by the 5, right? The 5 is the one that I want to get rid of. What do I do?
That?
Because I have 5w and I want to get w by itself.
Oh, because the equal, so it would be on the, it
So-
would be the answer that you're dividing by. Okay.
Right,
Okay.
that's what I'm dividing by is the 5.
Okay.
So if I'm going to divide by 5, I'm going to multiply by
So you're gonna go times 1/5.
Exactly is what I'm gonna do. And then I'm gonna do some reducing. 5 goes into there once and into there 3 times, and so W is gonna equal
-3.
-3 over 7, right? -3/7. So that's what happens is they take those shortcuts and they always just start flipping that fraction, flipping that fraction, flipping the fraction, but then they get to one where the fraction's not with the variable, and so you end up flipping the other number. And then people go, how come they didn't flip the fraction? Well, because they're really not understanding what they're doing. They're always dividing by the one that's by the variable, and that's the one that ends up getting flipped.
What is that called again? Multiply by reciprocal.
By the reciprocal, yep.
Good. Multiply.
Now, the next ones here will go back to something that's not, hopefully, quite as difficult as those are. Those are tricky ones,
They are. I couldn't.
especially if you don't really understand why they did what they did, because they did it different than what you think you're supposed to do. Here, we're solving for W. These are two-step equations. When you're going to solve for W, you want to get the W by itself. So the first thing you're going to do is move it so the numbers are together, right? So this is a -8. When I move it to the other side, I'm going to make it a +8, right? So now, 2W equals 22 plus 8, which is 30. Now I'm going to get rid of my coefficient, so I'm going to divide by the 2. W equals 30 divided by 2, which is 15. So again, if I really wanted to check it out, I would check it out over here and say, okay, I'm going to take 2 times the 15, and I'm going to minus the 8 from that answer to see if I really get 22. Well, 2 times 15 is 30, and 30 minus 8, sure enough, hey, there's my answer, 22.
By belly?
So number 5, I want to solve that for you. If I'm going to solve that for you, what should I do first?
I would say you're going to take the 26 minus the 12.
Exactly. I'm going to move that number over minus the 12. 12 minus 26 looks like it's 14. So 14 is equal to u over 5. That means u divided by 5, right? What do I do to get the u by itself then?
And I'm going to, oh gee, I don't know, because this is a fraction. So
This is showing division.
yes.
The
so you're
opposite
gonna
of dividing
multiply?
is multiplying. We're going to multiply by 5. Because when we multiply by 5 over 1, the 5's then cancel out. And I get u over 1, which is u. U equals 5 times 14, which must be 70, huh? So yes, not really often do we have a fraction in there, but that's what that is. And so they throw one in every once in a while to say, oh, do you remember, this means dividing, I'm going to multiply.
So u equals 7.
So number 6, I want to solve that for W. First thing I want to do if I'm going to solve it for W is
14 plus 10.
plus my 10, yep. 4W equals 24 then. Then I'm going to
Divide by 4.
divide by 4, so W equals
6.
6. There's my answer. So those are two-step equations because we had to do 2 steps to get to the answer.
Oh.
Now, the next ones are the ones Rose was stuck on.
What?
These are ones where you happen to have that negative coefficient. what we have to remember is that negative y is really equal to negative 1y.
It's a lie.
And we don't put the 1
It's just
there.
a way of tricking our minds, huh?
Right? Negative y is negative 1y and positive y is 1y
But they don't allow that
on the final answer. But when we do our work, we can put the ones there to remind ourselves because it's easy to forget. So I'm going to rewrite this and I'm going to say that it's 16 equals negative 1y plus 254. Now this is actually the Alex alternate explanation, but because I like to always try to solve problems in the same order, I'm changing it. I'm doing their alternate explanation, not their other one. So I'm going to solve these just like I did the previous ones. First thing I'm going to do is what?
254 minus 16.
Which order am I subtracting? I want the y by itself, so I am moving this to the other side, right?
So you're going to go 16 minus 254.
Exactly. And I'd probably grab my calculator just because I'm lazy, but you can do it on your paper if you want. I wrote too big. 16 minus 254, just so I don't make a silly mistake, is negative 238.
Oops.
I'm going to write it over here because I wrote big. Negative 238 is equal to negative 1y then. Okay, got that?
Do you know what my problem is with these? Is that I don't like sometimes I'll get the negative right, but most of the time I always forget to put my negative in there.
Well, knock it off.
I know, you're telling me because I have to do it
I do
5
the
times
same
before I
thing.
learn.
So, if I have negative 238 equals negative 1y, how do I get rid of that negative 1?
Just divide it.
I'm going to divide by negative 1. And then I'm going to say, oh, a negative divided by a negative is going to make that positive 238 to equal my y.
That's my problem.
So what I'm doing when I check it is I'm saying minus whatever the y value is, 238 plus 254. So since I have minus a positive, that's just negative 238 plus 54. Well, I have to subtract and I get 16 then. So number 8. If I'm going to solve that for w, I'm first going to look and say, oh, that's a minus w. So I'm going to say 269 equals 89 minus 1 w, just to remind myself there's a 1 there. When you get farther and you start taking intermediate algebra and college algebra, you probably won't need to write the 1, but for now, you probably want to put it there just to remind yourself. I'm going to solve this. What's the first thing I should do?
Get rid of 89.
I need to
Plus
move.
89?
Is that a positive or a negative 89?
That's a
It's a
plus.
positive.
It's a positive, so when I move it over,
It's going to be negative.
it's going to be a negative. So 269 minus 89.
180.
180 equals negative 1w then. Then I'm going to
Well, you only got one negative sign, so 180 divided by 1
by negative
by
1.
negative 1, but the answer would come out negative answer then,
It
right?
should, yes.
Okay.
Because I have a positive divided by a negative, which is a negative. So what I'm doing when I check it is I'm saying 89 minus, and in parentheses, I have a negative 180. Well, what happens when you minus a negative? When you have minus a negative, you end up adding those two numbers together, and that's how they came up with the 269, right? So, number 9. What's the first thing I probably want to do?
Minus 244.
Minus my 244. So then what am I going to have?
Negative 132.
And what's in front of my equal sign?
A y.
Not just a y, but a
Negative y.
negative y or negative 1y, right? So don't forget that negatives there, because that's the difference between just y and negative y. If it's a negative y, I end up having to divide, right? I divide by my negative 1, and my answer is a positive 132. If I take 244 and I subtract and in parentheses put my 132, oh, well I'm just taking 244 minus 132 and yep, I end up with 112. So keep in mind, that's the key. Negative y is negative 1y. And to get rid of that negative, we divide by that negative 1.
That's probably where I'm failing, I'm thinking.
So when you get to this one, you have to look at the alternate explanation. It's not the first one they do. The first one they do it different. But
Yep, then they
I
do
don't
like
like to
that.
do things in different orders. I like to do them in the same order.
Okay.
Because then I don't have to learn 15 different ways to do stuff. So again, we're solving a two-step equation. This time we just have more negative numbers in there. But we do it in the same order. First thing I want to do to solve that is what?
Negative 10 plus a negative 4?
Not plus a negative,
Oh.
just plus 4. This is a minus 4. When I move it over, I got to do the opposite, plus 4.
Okay.
So I have y over 2 equals, and what's negative 10 plus 4?
Negative 6.
Negative 6. So now, if I want to solve that for y, what do I do? There's that fraction one again.
6 over 1. Reciprocal it? Are we going to
Sort
do that?
of. I'm going to do the opposite of dividing, which is multiplying by 2, which would be the reciprocal, because this is 1/2, but we just times it by 2. When there's that fraction there, means dividing, so we multiply. Y then is going to equal negative 12. So I would have negative 12 over 2 minus 4 for this side of my equation if I were going to check it, right? Negative 12 divided by 2 is negative 6, and negative 6 minus 4, sure enough, gives me the answer of negative 10. Now, like I said, fractions aren't going to show up a lot, but when you do, then you got to remember, I got to multiply to get rid of that fraction. Number 11 then. I want to solve that one for v. What should I do first?
Well, we're going to bring down the 5 and minus it.
Minus the 5. So we have negative 1 minus 5, which is?
Negative 6.
Negative 6. Negative 6 equals 3v. Then we're going to
And then we're going to divide 6 by 3.
divide by that 3, yes. And so our answer,
3 equals negative 2.
v equals negative 2, exactly. So number 12, I want to solve it for you. What's the first thing I'm going to do?
And you're going to add that 6?
Add that 6, exactly. For u equals 16. And then I'm going to
Divide 16 by the 4.
divide by 4. 16 divided by 4 gives you 4. So u equals 4. Then after you do a whole bunch of those two-step problems, then they start making them longer yet. More steps to remember. So, if I have parentheses in my equation, my first step is to get rid of those parentheses because that's multiplying, and I have to do multiplying before I add or subtract. I can't do inside the parentheses, so I use that distributive property.
So anytime you have like a long problem like this, do you always follow the order of operations?
Well, when you're simplifying, not when you're solving, because in the solving, you actually do it opposite of what you're doing. Because you do your adding and subtracting before you do your multiplying and dividing. But if I'm just simplifying this without the equals, I have to follow my order of operations.
Okay.
I want to get rid of the parentheses first. That's going to be my first step. I'm going to take the 3 times the y and the 3 times the 2. So I'm going to have negative 3 equals 3y. 3 times a positive 2 is plus 6. That guy there's not in the parentheses, so we just bring him down. Now, my second step that I want to do is I want to simplify each side of my equation. This side, obviously, I can't do anything with, but this side is like those problems we did in the previous chapter, combining like terms. We can put these two things together.
Yes.
So we're not changing any signs, we're just combining. 3 minus 6,
would be negative.
negative 3 plus 6. Now, I can't do anything to combine those, so I'm stuck there. So negative 3 equals negative 3y plus 6. But now it should look really familiar to you. Now we're to those two-step problems that we did a whole bunch of in the last 3 kind of problems. So to solve this, we are going to
So now we're going to take negative 3 plus 6. No, minus.
it's minus 6 when I move it over, exactly. So we get
Negative 9?
negative 9 equals negative 3y. And then we're going to
Negative 9 divided by negative 3.
divide by that negative 3, and my answer
Positive 3.
3 is equal to y, or y equals 3. So, number 14, we are going to solve that for w. And we look and say, it's got parentheses, so I know I got to get rid of those first. So, on this left-hand side, what am I going to have? Have to get over there first, huh?
Negative 2w plus 4w. And 20?
Positive or negative?
Negative.
Minus 20 then. Equals or minus 22. Then I look and I say, if there's more than 2 things there, I know I'm going to be able to put some of it together and simplify that left-hand side. I got some w's I can put together, right? So negative 2w plus 4w is
A positive 2w?
positive 2w, exactly. So 2w minus 20 equals negative 22. Now I've got it down to where I have that 2-step equation. I'm going to do what next?
Plus 20.
I'm going to plus the 20 since this is a minus 20. So then I have,
Negative 42.
whoops, One's negative and one's positive, right? Because we have negative 22 plus 20.
So it's gonna stay positive?
No. What's my rule when I'm adding opposites? Subtract and take the sign of the larger.
Number.
I owe you $22, but I only have 20. I'm $2 in the hole. Right there again the case of which set of rules do I have to follow? Am I adding and subtracting, or am I multiplying and dividing? Because I'm going to put them together. Then I'm going to do what to solve that? Divide by my 2, right? So W is going to equal, not 1, negative 1. Negative divided by a positive is a negative. So yes, you're going to miss those signs probably 100 times before you get really good at this.
I missed something there. Because you
So
jumped.
right here, let's get rid of that negative 42, because that's not the right answer. Scribble that out, yeah. So you had negative 22 plus 20, which was,
Oh, okay, because we're going that way, that's how you got, okay. Yep, so we got negative 2.
so we have 2W equals negative 2. Just write it over here on the side. Then we had to solve that for W, so we is not 1, but negative 1. The same thing those girls are doing.
I know.
Positive divided by negative is a negative. All right. Number 15. First thing we want to do. Use our distributive property. Get rid of the parentheses. So we would have
7B. Sometimes A just 56.
plus 56 then, because we have a positive times a positive. So 7b plus 56 plus 7v equals 14 then. Then we're going to combine our like terms. So 7v plus 7v
It's 14B.
is 14v plus 56 equals 14. So then, if I'm going to solve that for v, the next thing I want to do is
14 divided by, no.
minus the 56, right? We got to move that over. It's a plus, so we make it minus 56. 14v equals, if you take 14 minus 56, you are going to get
Negative 42.
negative 42. And then our last step,
Take that negative 42 divided by 14.
we divide by that 14 and we get negative 3. V equals negative 3.
Yep.
And now we have some where we're going to have variables on both sides instead of variables just on one side. Again, we have the parentheses, so we know anytime we see those, we got to get rid of those and use our distributive property like we did before. So we're going to do that side. This side is going to stay the same for now. 9u minus 22 is going to equal, and if I multiply times 7, 7u minus 28, right? Now, what happens when I have both numbers and variables on both sides? is I want my variables on one side, my numbers on the opposite side. Doesn't matter which way you move them. Usually I move my variables to the left, my numbers to the right. So when I do this, I'm going to say, okay, I want to get these variables together. I'm going to move this over here. It's a positive. I've got to make that a minus 7u. Then in the same step, because I don't want to have to write a whole bunch of stuff on my paper and I'm going to save some space, I'm going to move my number to the opposite side. Since this is a minus 22, I'm going to plus my 22. So then when I did 9 minus 7, she already said up 2u. Negative 28 plus 22 minus 6. So if I have 2u equals negative 6, to solve that I'm going to divide by my 2. U then is going to equal negative 3. So if I have variables and numbers on both sides, I'm going to move my variables one way, my numbers the opposite way. I could do it in 2 separate steps, but that's just more work, so I just do them in the same one. So number 17, first thing, got to get rid of those parentheses. So on the left-hand side, I'm going to have what? Negative 6v.
36.
Minus 36. Or negative times a positive is a negative. So negative 6v minus 36 equals negative 3v minus 12. So, if I want to move my v's over to the left-hand side, what am I going to do with that negative 3v?
Plus.
I'm going to plus it. Cross it off from here, move it over here, and add it. Since it was negative, I got to make it positive. Then I'm going to move my number over to the right-hand side. Since this is a minus 36, when I move it over to the other side, I'm going to do what? Add it, plus my 36. Negative 6 plus 3 is negative 3. So negative 3v equals negative 12 plus 36 is 24. Then my last step, v is going to equal negative 8 because I'm going to take 24 divided by that negative 3. So number 18, first thing I'm going to do.
Parentheses?
Get rid of those parentheses. So I'm still going to have negative 7y plus 24. It's going to equal, what's on the other side? 2y plus 6. So if I want to solve that for y, what's the next thing I probably want to do?
Negative 2y.
Minus my 2y, move that over. And
9y. Negative. No. Is that right?
you could do that. I could also just move this over here so that I don't have, if you do that, it's all right. Negative 9y plus 24 equals 6, right? Because then what you're going to do, minus your 24, right? 6 minus 24 is going to give me what? Negative 18. And then my last step, divide by my negative 9. Y is going to equal 2. Negative divided by a negative makes that a positive 2. So, I usually move both things at one time, but if you're not comfortable doing that, just move one, and then you've got that two-step equation like we did on those previous ones. All right, so that should be the next 6 things on your pie chart. See, they start getting longer.